everybody. We just started using a really cool science curriculum that I wanted to share with you tonight. It's called Real Science for Kids, and we decided to go with the Building Blocks of Science books. They also have books that separate it into, you can focus just on chemistry, biology, astronomy, geology, or the Building Blocks of Science, which incorporate all of those sciences. So we decided to go with the Building Blocks of Science, and I just wanted to show you a little bit about what drew us to it and what we like about it. We asked a lot of people before we decided on a curriculum. Like just about everybody else, we don't have $1 million to spend in a curriculum. It was a little bit expensive, but for what we get for it, it was totally worth it. The textbook is the most expensive part at, I think it was $97. Other than that, it also comes with a lab book and a teacher's manual, which I initially didn't want, but now I'm kind of glad I have it, and I'll show you why. So here they are. These are the Building Blocks of Science sets. My daughter is 10 and is using book 3, and my son is 12 and a half using book 5. They both finished, my daughter finished 3rd grade in public school, and my son finished 6th grade in public school. But what I did is I discovered that I had no idea how in-depth they had gone in science in either grade in their respective schools. So what I did is I actually sat them down at the website, and I had them look at a sample of the pages and the chapters and stuff like that. And I had them decide what level. First of all, I had them decide whether or not they thought it would be a good fit for them based on the samples that were online. The second thing I had them do was I had them decide what level, based on the information that they had, what level they felt would be the best place for them to start. So my daughter chose book 3 and my son chose book 5. And I'm going to show you, first I'm going to show you book 3, the student textbook. This is really cool. My daughter finds it really easy. She does enjoy reading, but you'll see in the beginning there's a table of contents, and the very first chapter is just introductions, using chemistry, using biology, using physics, using geology, and using astronomy, and then a summary at the end of the chapter, which is really great. I've read through these chapters as well, and I find them a really easy read. They don't overcomplicate things too much, which is great. And then it goes into sections. So the first section is chemistry. The second section is biology, physics, geology, and then astronomy, and then they have a conclusion chapter as well. Now what we're doing is a little bit different. We are actually, instead of going through and doing all of chemistry and all of biology and all of physics and geology and so on, we're actually doing, we did the introduction, and then we went on to chapter 2 for chemistry. But we didn't go on to chapter 3. Instead, we went on to the next section, which is the first biology chapter, which is plants, chapter 6. And then after she finishes chapter 6, we're going to go on to chapter 10, which is the first chapter in the physics section. And then we're going to go on to 14, which is the first chapter in the geology section, so that she doesn't stop using any section for too long. So she can kind of build on it more. We're going to see how that goes. I asked, and nobody else has done it that way. But the author of the person who wrote the book also thought it may work and it may be a good idea. So in chemistry, they cover mixtures, unmixing, molecular chains, molecules in your body. Biology, they cover plants, food for plants, plant parts, and growing a plant. And physics, it's energy of atoms and molecules, electricity, moving electrons, and magnets. Geology is our water, plants and animals, magnetic earth, working together. And then astronomy is galaxies, our galaxy, the Milky Way, beyond our galaxy and other stuff in space. And then the conclusion for all the sciences. You can see it's nice and colorful. And it breaks apart which section you're doing. Like chapter 1 is basically an introduction to each one of the 5 sciences. So it kind of makes it fun and interesting. They have these cool little comics on a lot of the pages. It's large print, very easy to read, and it's fun for them as well. So this is chapter 1, and just an introduction to each of the chapters, or each of the 5 sciences. In this one, my daughter and I both really enjoyed chapter 2 on mixtures, which we just finished. And we also did the lab experiment on it as well. How they actually draw out what the molecules look like. So you can see the hydrogen and the oxygen, what they look like. So they can compare them to the others. And they always draw a picture of what the molecules look like. What each of the atoms in the molecule looks like. And it's just fun for them. And I'll show you, so that's the end of chapter 5. I'll show you chapter 6, and what plants is. It goes into plant cells, where plants live. And they go into, domain, kingdom, phylum. Actually, I don't know if they go into phylum. But it's a very nice, easy read for the kids. And it's not a large book. It says there's 22 chapters, which would give 22 weeks worth of work if they did 1 chapter per week. I let my kids go at their own speed. My daughter is on chapter 6, which is the 3rd chapter that we're working on in the book, whereas my son is still working on... Watch out, puppy dog. My son is still working on the 2nd chapter he just started. So this is the lab book that goes with that. If I can keep the dog's face out. So this is the lab book. It is less expensive. It keeps it's black and white rather than color, which I think keeps the cost down. But I think the color book for science is definitely a plus. So it asks questions based on the chapter to get them thinking. This is just a day without science. Things invented with science and used in a day. So she's exploring the world in this chapter. And then they give another description at the end to kind of either refresh their memories or just go in a little bit more in depth. We really enjoyed this experiment. I wanted to post us doing the experiment on YouTube, but unfortunately, something happened to the second half of the video, which was really most of the work that we did. But it had us create mixtures. And she recorded her results. So, and then instead of chapter 3, we'll go on to chapter 6. So each chapter in the student textbook corresponds with a chapter in the lab book. So I'll just kind of flip through the rest. It's all pretty much set up the same way, with an experiment to go with each chapter. And again, 22 chapters, 22 experiments. And this is a teacher's manual. This is the one that I really didn't care whether or not I got, but I'm glad I did. So in the very beginning, it lists all the experiments and all the supplies you will need for each experiment. So you can see what we needed for the experiment for Chapter 2, which was the first chemistry section. Rico, stop. Okay, so the teacher's manual. And it shows the materials that you'll need for each experiment, 1 through 22, which I found very helpful, that it's all there in just a list. And then it goes through each chapter. Now, it's not, see, I thought it was going to be like, oh, you should teach them this extra stuff that's not in the book and stuff like that. But that's really not it at all. They read the chapter, they do the lab experiment. This is just extra help for us as teacher or parent. Ways we can involve them in discussion about it. There's really nothing big. You can see it's not a huge book and it's not complicated. It really just shows the flow of the experiments. And now I will give you a peek into Book 5 and how it's different. Book 5 is, I'll show you the comparison, a bit thicker than Book 3. So here we have Book 5. It's the same exact setup all through, though. A science introduction. This goes into history, philosophy, scientific method, scientific measurements, interpreting data. And then again, it goes right through chemistry. And in chemistry, they have what is chemistry, matter, chemical bonding, and chemical reactions. They have the same amount of chapters in each book. Biology, what is biology, the chemistry of life, cells, the building blocks of life, viruses, bacteria, and archaea. Physics, what is physics, force, energy, and work, potential and kinetic energy, conservation of energy. Geology, what is geology, rocks, minerals, and salt, Earth's layers, Earth dynamics, what is astronomy, Earth and space, the moon and sun, the planets, and then again another conclusion chapter. The same amount of chapters. There is always 22 chapters in every book, which would get you through 22 weeks if you did it by week. But again, it's really up to you how quickly you go through the work. It's up to you and your child. So this is Chapter 1, what is science? The history of science. And again, it keeps it fun for them. Give you a little look in. You can see it's a little bit more in-depth and a little bit more wordy than the Book 3. Let's see if I can do a side-by-side comparison of the type. Yeah, so the type in Book 5 compared to Book 3 is smaller. This is Book 5 and this is Book 3. So you can see it gets more wordy, the type gets smaller, and the book does get thicker because it goes into more detail. But then they also assume that, you know, the kids doing Book 5 are older than the kids doing Book 3. It can handle a little bit more information. So this is Chapter 6. My son right now is still on Chapter 2. But this goes into biology, what is life? Philosophical maps help us interpret science, organizing life, and it even gives some philosophers that you can research more and stuff like that. Cells. Still a very cool, nice, colorful book. I think it's more interesting and more straightforward than any like typical textbook. I think it's better organized, and a little bit more simplified, not in what they're teaching, but in how they word it and how they teach it, which is great. Rocks, minerals, and soils for geology. And then, of course, the lab book to go with it. And you can see the lab book really is set up the same as the lab book in book 3. Again, smaller type. That is really it. The size of the books is, I would say, the same. The size of the lab books does not change. The type gets a little bit smaller. So it goes history of science, and it goes into having them explore their own history. Some kids may be interested in that. My son really wasn't so much. Kind of a blow for Mom, who is a big fan of genealogy and history. He loves history. He just, I guess, isn't really interested in about his own personal history. So this is learning to argue scientifically. That would go with chapter 2. So it answers questions, and then you do an experiment. It tells you everything that you need right here, what the experiment is. And then again, another part 4 that has why, that goes into more detail and kind of summarizes, I think, everything very nicely. And I think in the end, some things that didn't click during the chapter reading and the lab work kind of click here at the end when it explains everything. And let's just check. Biology. Groups or categories of food. It's just all very straightforward. And of course, there is a teacher's manual to go with it. Again, not a large book. It's the same size as the teacher's manual. Oh, mine's not printed on. I wonder if that was a mistake. Oh, well, it doesn't matter. It's printed on the front. I know what it is. The book 5 teacher's manual. And again, it's set up the exact same way, so there's no changes. You know exactly where everything is. The materials that will be needed for each experiment, all set up, so you know what's coming ahead, what you need in advance. And again, each experiment set up by section. And it also tells you in the front of each one what you would need. And it's really, it's only a couple of pages for each experiment. So whether you need it or not is up to you. I find it moderately helpful, but we could definitely, get by without it. But if you buy the set from Real Science for Kids, I'm going to link their website down in the description. If you buy it from them, you can get the set for the same price as if you just bought the lab book and the textbook, and it would include the teacher's manual anyway. So it really makes sense just to get it. So if you find out that you want it, you have it, rather than having to buy everything separately and pay more for it. You do pay more for the whole set together. I think we paid $124 for the set, whereas the lab book and the teacher's manual, I think, are around $37, and the textbook is around $97. So it is totally worth it, and I will link to the Real Science for Kids website below. So I hope that was helpful for you. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel down below. and just click like on the video, as well as share it with any friends that you feel like might benefit from it. If you have any questions, comments, whatever, definitely leave them. We love hearing from our viewers. And we'll see you later.